Hello everyone, today we'll be taking a quick look at armor used by Jaune from the RWBY animated series. Now before I even get started to talk about armor and weapons and equipment, there's one thing we need to get clear. First of all, I understand that RWBY is a fictional universe where magic called aura exists, and it can be used in multiple forms for protection, which is why so many characters don't use armor and are still fine. It can be used for carrying out some fancy magical attacks and stuff like that. I understand this. But the other thing to consider is that it's very clear from the creators of RWBY that aura can enhance weapons, which is why that weapons, being over complex in the RWBY world, don't just fall apart when they're swung around. So, taking that into consideration, I see no reason why that cannot be applied to armor, and seeing as quite a few characters use armor, it would make sense that it in itself is useful. Now, before we can get into more details about armor, we need to discuss the way that Jaune fights. He fights as a traditional knight from the earlier period of knighthood. He uses a heater shield, a great shield, and a simple arming sword. Not only that, but his fighting style is decidedly less acrobatic, more rigid, and more traditional than the ones used by his partners and allies. That gives us the opportunity to more effectively apply traditional medieval combat knowledge to the way he fights. Well, first thing we need to discuss is that when using a shield, in particular a smaller shield like the heater shield, is that there are several areas that will be uncovered even frontally. Those are the legs, the weapon arm, and the head. So these areas are the most critical to be protected. Now, of course, torso protection is always necessary, of course, since it is one of the most vital parts of the human body and contains quite a few vital organs. So it would be ridiculous to just say, oh, all he needs to have is decently protected limbs and head and he's fine. No, torso protection is always a necessity. So let's take a look at his Volume 1 armor. Well, there's not a lot of it. In Volume 1, he has this little chest piece that is, I'm actually willing to call it cuirass. It's semi-proper, and the way it actually leaves the sides partially uncovered does quite remind me of late 14th century cuirasses, and of course it does have a backplate, which is a bonus. He has plate spolders, and what appears to be mini arm guards covering his forearms. Decidedly inadequate for the way he fights. In Volume 2, he has a much more proper cuirass. He has much more proper protection for the arms, leaving them fully covered from the hands up to the elbows. And he has an enlarged pauldron on his left shoulder. Now, the enlarged pauldron on the left shoulder was oftentimes a characteristic of later century plate armor, as many knights during, let's say, the 15th century started using two-handed weapons. They started using halberds or pole arms or pole axes. So, with using two-handed weapons, they couldn't use a shield. So, instead, they started using enlarged left pauldrons, which can be used as a sort of shield. So this, when you take into consideration the fact that his sword can now be transformed into a two-handed sword, is a good idea. What isn't a good idea, however, is the removal of the right spolder. His right shoulder is now uncovered, which is ridiculous because he still typically fights using a sword and shield. And his right arm, the one that's going to be more vulnerable to attacks, has his shoulder unprotected. That's a bad idea. He should have a proper plate on his right shoulder. He should have his spolder back. Other than that, the armor hasn't changed that much. He has thankfully replaced his sneakers with proper boots, which is a benefit, but he does still carry jeans for some reason. His legs are still fully uncovered. His head has no protection at all, which is generally a bad idea. His later volume appearance is an improvement, but not by that much. He could use quite a bit of improvement if he wants to be optimized for his combat style.